Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, Vasili, Gianarakos. Vasili, trade deadline has passed. As of right now, it is 6:30 on the East Coast as we record this, just 3.5 hours after the deadline. How you doing, buddy?
What a trade deadline, right? Like so much
The
movement.
thrill.
Yeah, a bunch of big trades, obviously. There were some notable ones we're gonna, go over, but most of the stuff and most of the big stuff really happened leading up to the deadline. Obviously, from a Flyers perspective, there are two trades that are made, and we'll get into that. And there's one big trade that is not made, and that's kind of the big news, and we'll also address that. But I'm doing well. It's end of the day on Friday, so that means weekend's coming up. 30 centimeters of snow is coming our way here in Toronto as I'm speaking. So if I cut out at any point in this episode, it's because my power effectively went out. So Yariv will be going solo after that, but we'll see how it works, and we're gonna get into the trade deadline here. So how do you think it went today, and what's your thoughts, Yariv, so far?
Yeah. I think we have to go piece by piece.
Mhm.
Generally, I was saying this to you obviously before we recorded. I am not in the same place as everybody else, at least from like the rage level. Like nothing that happened today made me angry. I was surprised. This is
Oh yeah.
a first for me. Um, but I don't think I saw anything here that like I didn't expect from Chuck Fletcher. Let's say
I
that. Like
honestly, that's a great way to put it. I think if you look at his track record and kind of how he, navigates the trade market in the past and what he's done so far, it's not that out of the ordinary to see what he did today kind of happen. Do you think that's fair to
it's
say, or?
yeah, I think I said this online, or maybe I said this on the last episode, but he gets bare minimum.
Yeah.
He gets bare minimum back, and he gets bare minimum return. Like there's almost never the case where he exceed negotiating contracts. Actually, he's not bad at all. But as far as like trades, it's very rare that he's come out like looking like the smarter GM.
Or the
I would
winner of a trade, yeah.
Yeah, I would say the only one is the Niskanen one, but you could also make the argument that Gudis is still playing and Niskanen is not playing. He stopped playing after 1 year.
Yeah.
So while I still love that trade on its surface, like he doesn't win trades. So I wasn't expecting him. Like I was hoping that we would get like a third, fourth round pick, but at the same time, it's kind of embarrassing to get a third, fourth round pick for JVR. So I'm kind of like, okay. I mean, like I
That's
hope
what
we
I
get it,
thought.
but I'm
Yeah.
also not like, oh yeah, like this is the thing.
Well, I think the way to sum it up is either way, like even if he would have got a third, fourth round pick, I think he would have probably got shit on by the fan base who's like
Oh
raging
yeah,
nonetheless. But him not trading him at all obviously is gonna have the same reaction too. So it's not much of a change in terms of like the perception of him and just the perception of like the trade that he did make or didn't make. I just think from addressing the JVR thing, and we'll dive into it more, but just kind of to lay it out, like if you're going to be a seller and you're going to rebuild a team, you need draft capital, you need assets. So the fact that you can't move your most valuable expiring asset for a pick, even if it isn't going to be what you're looking for, I just think it's a failure on their level in terms of that, and just from a management perspective of like assets.
yeah. I mean, it's consistently falling short of expectations or hopes. And like
Yeah.
again, I've said this before too, right? Like you can poke a person, but if you're gonna poke them over and over again, they're gonna want to fucking rip your head off. And that's kind of what we're watching here, right? It's like, yo,
Yeah.
again, like it's at a point where, like even if you want to give Fletcher the benefit of the doubt, he's never like exceeding your expectations. He's very rarely meeting your expectations. A lot of times he's coming right, excuse me, right below it. And I feel like that's kind of where we stand today. And I think a lot of people are surprised by we can go topic by topic here, but
Yeah.
I think it was surprising for some people. It wasn't for me. Like I didn't feel like cornered by this. I was surprised that nothing was done at the end,
Yeah.
but I wasn't like, oh my God, this is the fireable offense. I think there's already been fireable offenses.
I think, I mean, if you look
So,
at, yeah, if you look at his track record and just what he's done and the team's success since he's come in, like he was brought in to stabilize technically and make them better. They did improve for one season, but since that time, they've been on a downward spiral. So you can't tangibly look at any of the results that he's had and say, well, this is somebody that, needs to stick around. Like you're saying, he could have been fired at any point before this for sure.
well, one thing Locked On Flyers said, and I'll give them a shout out to this, is that they're like, he just doesn't get oh man, what was the point she said? I think I might have lost it. It's a good point though.
That's okay, but still, shout
Damn it, I
out to
lost
them.
it.
Shout
Yeah,
out to
shout
them.
out
It's
to
a
them.
great
It'll come
podcast.
back to me. But the whole point is just he's always kind of not meeting your expectation. You're not really sure what you're gonna get next from this guy, and nobody sees really a road. Oh, I remember what she said. Nobody really sees a road, out. And they were making a point. Maybe this isn't 100% true, but they were saying that if you look at the players that he brought in, he is not able to even move these players, right? The players that he
Yeah.
signed in on contracts, he's having trouble moving them. They're not our highest end pieces. And he's living off of, and I've said this here, he's living off of the work that was done by
By
Hextall.
Hextall, yeah.
Yeah, those are the guys that are still here. And they weren't moved either, which I actually agree with. But my issues with Fletcher is not that, oh, I want him to trade all these guys. Is that the guys that he brought in, I never thought that any of them were impact enough to actually go out and invest the assets that he invested.
Yeah.
Outside, like again, outside of Niskanen, most of the packages I thought we overpaid or we invested in the wrong player. I didn't mind Ristolainen, but obviously I'm like, why did we trade for Ghost? I was like, this D'Angelo thing, I was like, this is just like bringing Ghost back in. I was like, none of these trades on their face level are an upgrade. Like nothing here is like a massive upgrade. They're like horizontal shifts. I was like, we need a true investment. That's why I thought at the time when Jack Eichel was around, I was like, that's the guy that's what you pull the trigger on. That's what if a Dylan Larkin makes it to free agency, if a Johnny Gaudreau even, right? If you were even a mid-level team, and like what Columbus did, if that becomes available, that's what's worth hampering your cap for, right? Or going all out for. Not a lot of like, oh, we really need a right-handed guy who's physical. Let's like go all out for him. It's like, no, that you like
Yeah.
draft them and develop them, and then you go all out, or you package some of these guys and you go get the elite guy and you go get 2 or 3, like kind of what the Devils did right now. I mean, it sucks that I have to shout them out, but by adding a guy like Timo Meier, right? They don't have enough. They have a lot of good young players there. None of them are 100% developed. They're still like coming along the way, but they need to fill out that entire top 9 of like real talented guys to win a Stanley Cup. And they're like, well, we have like 6 dudes right now, 7 dudes. I was like, let's add another guy that's top level. And that's how Tampa was able to do what they were doing. That's how Boston, it's like, that's the core that people are talking about, but it's a lot of players. It's not like a small collection of guys wearing A's and a C. It's like not 5, 6
It's
guys.
a bunch of guys buying in, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
and those additions help to the buy-in. But I think,
But they have to be high level,
yeah,
high
I
end,
just think with what you're saying, you're even kind of speaks to the
like
inability
good to
to,
great.
yeah, the inability to manage, the team's assets in the proper way. Because I think really they did, get left in a good spot with cap space and the assets they were left with, after Hextall, but Fletcher wasn't able to kind of cash in on what he was given, and it's all ultimately like, turned into what we see now, which is the downward spiral kind of the team. I just think from the trade deadline perspective and just his competence in general to make these deals and kind of sell for the Flyers and get them into a rebuilding state. Does it speak to the fact that there's just a lack of confidence there because he could not read the market and understand that all these teams that are interested in Van Riemsdyk initially have already made these additions of depth pieces that are very similar to him. So then that kind of brings those teams out of the running
Right.
to acquire him. and then in that case dries up the JVR market, and then you see a situation culminate where you don't really even get anything back for a player who's been a perennial 20-goal guy, scored 300 goals in this league. That Charlie O'Connor in the press conference mentioned to Chuck Fletcher, like how can you not get something back for a guy who's played in the playoffs, scored these many goals, and it kind of leads you to wonder, right? I think with the track record together and what happened, is it just time, to move on for the Flyers in terms of Fletcher? Like, is he able to effectively get the rebuild started in a way that we need? I don't know if that's the case.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you're being nice at this point. I think everybody kind of knows. Look, I said the redemption, I'm always open to it. You can always change my mind. He had an opportunity but I'm like, nope, it's more of the same. Like, more of the lackluster. So here's the one. Let's talk about the two moves. I do want to see something positive.
Yeah,
people
it's
might
not
not
all bad. It's not all bad.
This is the stuff that people ignore. So if you want to tell the story, I think you have to say everything. So you can't just explode on the bad stuff. Mm-hmm. So the two deals that were made, Zach McEwen was traded to LA for Brandon Lemieux and a 5th-round pick in 2024. And then Patrick Brown was shipped to Ottawa for a 6th in 2023. Now, a 5th and a 6th, not bad, especially for the caliber of players. It, could be worse, especially with what we were seeing and the fact we couldn't even get anything for JVR. It's not bad at all. And you look at that return for two guys that you picked up on waivers. You turned 2 waiver pickups.
That's not bad, yeah.
A 5th and a 6th-round pick. That is actually not bad at all. That's actually pretty good management on the, lower tier moves. They're not going to move the needle. Odds are, I mean, every now and then you get a Noah Cates,
or a Desnoyers in the 5th round. But like typically those picks, it's like 4 to 5 to 6% range of becoming NHL guys.
Yeah, and honestly, Desnoyers still needs to do it. But I agree with your sentiment. It's just like but again, they can be coupled, they can be packaged, they can be moved for other players in the future. It's worth more than us just losing these guys because they obviously weren't going to be around here much longer. And a shout out to Zach McEwen, and his mom's a friend of the show.
Great guy.
And, honestly, I think he wins in this
situation. He's going to a playoff team, and I mean he gives max effort out there and is just a class act. So,
I hope he gets to play.
Yeah, congrats to Zach there going to LA because I mean he'll be a part of a playoff run hopefully. So that's great for him.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry to cut you off, but congrats to Patrick Brown as well. I think he's gonna be like a pretty forgettable player
for the Sens,
no, I mean for the Flyers.
Okay.
Just he's not going to be like a player who's kind of remembered much, but he did play his well admirably here, I think, in a lot of ways. He just has no offensive punch. But to a team like Ottawa, who really just needs to bolster their team defense, I think it's a good move. Yeah. And obviously with the Chikrin pickup as well.
They're pushing for playoffs. They're on a pretty good run right now.
Exactly.
Giroux's playing insane for this season. He's playing well. But I mean, we got Tippett in the return there, so it sucks, obviously, but you get a good thing back.
I'm not complaining about the fact. Again, that's another move, right?
Yeah.
You could have had all of it. You could have had your captain and franchise player, which ultimately did not need to leave.
Yeah.
He did not need to leave. I'm sorry, I still don't get that. He did not need to leave.
But he would have open to coming back, technically.
No, he wanted to come back.
Yeah.
Fletcher wanted him to go. Because he's like, oh, well, it's time to turn this. No, you get rid of Kevin Hayes. You don't get rid of Giroux. Giroux is a franchise caliber player. He stays as long as he wants. And quite frankly, I don't care if people have an argument with that. Look at the most successful teams in the league. How old is Patrice Bergeron?
Yeah, it's a great point, man.
Like, you do not throw these guys. How old is Ovechkin? Crosby, Malkin? Like, what the hell are we talking about here? I do not understand for the life of me why Claude Giroux was told that he was not coming back.
Yeah, it's just tough in general. Like
cap space.
I don't know this whole
Tony D'Angelo, and I like Tony D, but
this whole situation in general, right? Like, I mean, in terms of tangible players today, the Flyers get back Brendan Lemieux. He's obviously going to be.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I should have brought that. I didn't even bring him up.
That's okay. They get.
I had him written here too. That's the worst part.
Don't worry. They get Brendan Lemieux, and then I mean, he's going to be more of kind of like a tryout. Chuck Fletcher was saying in the press conference.
I have thoughts on him. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, gets 20 games. Basically here, and he's a UFA, so it's really like if he doesn't work, you
I
get
think that was to
effectively a fifth round
guarantee.
pick.
I'm sorry to cut
Yeah,
you off, but I think it was to guarantee that the deal got done on the
it
phone.
did. Yeah, he
And
said
people
that.
are really, yeah. I'm
He
sorry, but people,
said he said sorry, essentially that like he had to take the contract back for the trade to go through.
yeah, no, sorry, I'm like jumping over you. Uh, I just like I hear him kind of get knocked for that. I'm like, nah, I don't really have a problem with that. He's just like, no, let's get the deal done. Don't worry about the other team.
That's
I'll take him. I have a
yeah.
banged up team anyway. Worst comes to worst, I sit him on my bench because I want to send a lot of these guys Lickshell. No, I don't know if he can go back, but
He did go back.
he did go back. Okay, so I want to send these guys down for a playoff run. They're the best players on the Phantoms.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense because he's a UFA, so you're not really committed. If he had term, then that would be pretty stupid. So I don't mind if he fits well with Torts and meshes. Okay,
This
whatever,
is gonna
bring
be
him
very.
back.
That's the interesting thing. So
Yeah.
okay, I'll be honest with you. I'm a fan of Brendan Lemieux from his draft year. I'm
Yeah.
not saying to what he is today. When he got drafted, this guy was drafted at 31, I believe, which was
Yeah.
the first round or second round. By today's standard, it's the first round. So this is the end of the first round pick type of guy. He has skill. His father is Claude Lemieux. If you guys don't know that, Claude Lemieux was a bastard. He was
Yeah.
one of the best. He was like Tom
He's a
Wilson.
bastard usually towards the Flyers too.
Yeah,
So
yeah. He's like Tom Wilson of his era, kind of, only more talented.
and could score a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. He was a better scorer, better playmaker, and just an asshole. And it seems like his son carries that. I don't think his son is as talented.
No, but he has the asshole gene though that he
Yeah.
took on.
So theoretically, it has not worked here typically with those type of players. It
No.
seems like on paper that it would, because people are like, oh, Philadelphia loves, but like they have to be good
Yeah.
to be an asshole here. You have to be like talented and be an asshole. So like I am interested to see if Brendan Lemieux has something to his game. I haven't watched him play in a while. I did like his game at one point. His production actually is not that bad for the amount of games that he's played. He's only 26. There could be something to squeeze out of him here. So the trial at the end of the season, I think, will be a little bit interesting. Ultimately, I do think he walks away. But I think it'll be at least interesting. I think it'll be entertaining to see if this guy can stay in the lineup and not take enough penalties to drive Tortorella nuts. Because if he has like outbursts on the ice, if they're not timely, he's not going to be here. But I believe he's like best friends with Tony D'Angelo. I believe they had a podcast together that was political. Let's just say that way, and upset a lot of people.
Yeah, they were on the Rangers together there for a couple of years, and I mean, he's only played 27 games, I guess, for LA, so it makes sense why they kind of were moving him. Obviously, didn't have a regular spot in the lineup there, so.
From what I've been told, he can be a locker room problem as well. I don't know if that's true.
We'll see how that all meshes together, I guess.
If that's true, you definitely don't want him here beyond this season.
Yeah.
You can have him here with his buddies and maybe he'll behave himself. Like, remember, Evander Kane is also a locker room problem. Remember, the entire San Jose Sharks team went, you got to get this guy off the team. And now he's playing, that's like yesterday's news.
Mm-hmm.
He's performing on the ice.
It all depends, right? If the results are there. I don't know if they'll be there for Lemieux in that sense.
No, I don't think so.
That's we'll definitely see what happens.
I don't think we'll get much results, but he does have the opportunity to play like the right hand side.
He could be a fourth. Yeah, it could be a fourth liner for them if he, kind of ascribes to what Tortorella is looking for. But I just think in general, this trade deadline, it's hard when you assess it overall to really feel too confident about the move forward just for the team in general. Because I mean, if the team is selling and rebuilding and kind of just looking to, get younger guys in here, how does today give any really confidence that they can even do any of that? I don't know. Right. So I think just from an overall perspective, it's hard to look at what we've seen today and really be confident in Fletcher and the brass moving ahead. But nonetheless, I don't think most people were confident anyway, even before today. So I think that's a way to kind of look at it too, right? It's more like, you can be outraged by what happened, but at this point, it's like we should almost kind of expect this from Chuck Fletcher. I think that's the real issue, right? Like, when does ownership and then even, senior management kind of get fed up with this, and do they see the outrage from the fans and kind of make any changes after the season? I wonder if that's a possibility, and how it all plays out for him going ahead.
It's very interesting because I don't know if I don't know. I feel like all that stuff gets just reassessed at the end of the season.
Yeah, that's what I
They
mean.
sit down, they analyze what happened because these guys are too busy to actually follow the team on a regular basis. Busy. I don't know. I don't know what happens with Fletcher at this point. I personally don't think what happened at this trade deadline is a fireable offense. Um, I think the other stuff before it was.
Okay.
Um,
I mean, I'm gonna say I think a lot of things before it were. I also think this is a fireable offense as well, just because you can't sell your most valuable assets. So that's my
sure,
opinion, though. But
sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess the way I see it is I don't think JVR is that valuable. Like
I
in the
feel
sense,
you.
yeah,
Yeah, that
like
makes.
I
I
agree
understand.
he is the most valuable asset, but he's not like that valuable. It wasn't like it's not
Yeah.
like Sanheim on an expiring deal
Oh,
and you couldn't
of
trade him.
course. I wonder though, like, do you
The
think
guy
the
is at the end of his
way
career.
I wonder though, do you think the way Fletcher approached, like, if he would have been, looking to trade him, let's say a week and a half ago instead, would he have got a better return? Or do you think he was already trying to do that and just couldn't get anything for him? Do you think the
No, I don't.
approach?
I think there's a good chance he could have gotten a deal done a while ago.
Yeah.
But
Because we talked about
I
it on the
think he should
podcast,
have.
like, should he do it now? Remember, we had a couple episodes ago
Yes,
where, like, should he start
I was
trading
like he
now?
should do it now, right
Yeah.
now.
We did say this, but
Yes.
unfortunately it didn't happen. I wonder if, like, that lack of action, is this why they're in this predicament where they're left with technically their most valuable asset not being sold off, you know?
The one thing that I like that Chuck Fletcher did when he came here is he didn't make any serious moves during the season. He didn't like come in a situation where he didn't know anybody and just start hacking away. He like gave us some time. And then when he had a plan, I didn't like the Kevin Hayes signing, but he went out and got him. Like
Yeah.
he just went out for like people are like, oh, he doesn't want to come to Philly. It was traded a pick to get him here, talked him into it. Boom, had one of the. I think he was a top 3 available player right that year in UFA.
Yeah. Yeah.
Overpaid him financially, but again, it's a UFA, so like it's kind of understandable.
Expected. Yeah.
Yeah, it's expected. He's not from your team. You even brought him in early to show how much you want him and whatnot. So I liked that. Like he came in with a plan, added some players, added it, and then the team was like I liked that decisiveness. Now it just doesn't seem that way.
It doesn't seem like there's any sort of decisiveness at all with just the moves he's making. It almost seems
Like
like it's kind of like lackadaisical in a
like
sense.
when they were winning, I was
Yeah.
like, get rid of JVR because I
Yeah.
was like, it doesn't matter.
And he's looking good.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but I was like, it doesn't matter. You want to see how they can do without JVR.
Hmm.
You want to pull that away from them
Yeah.
and go, okay, now it's you guys. We're not making the playoffs anyway. So now it's all you. And hopefully you drop lower in the standings. And like, and if they don't, if they go on a win streak and they do it without their veteran players, you can't say shit anyway. Because it turns out the younger guys are better than you think they are. So it's like a win-win at that point to do that. So that's why
Yeah.
like I don't know, man. But I've
I just
already
find
felt like
it
this
sorry,
way with Fletcher.
I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
say I just find it crazy that there's certain players, like similar value guys, that, like,
Got third round picks.
yeah, like Nino Niederreiter gets traded to Winnipeg, 2024 second. Like, he only had 28 points this season in 56 games. JVR has 23 points in 41 games. So, like, I know everybody's like 1 goal, 1 assist the last like 15 games. I'm sure that plays a factor. But I mean, you have a similar player with a similar point range, played more games, getting a second rounder. I just feel like as the GM, and you see that, and the guy's a perennial 20 goal guy, even if he hasn't been playing good as of late, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Doesn't, like I said, doesn't give a lot of confidence.
Your
And I mean,
bullshit meter goes off.
yeah, we're going around in circles, obviously talking about how, like, he's not done a good job. He's done a poor job, basically a failure in terms of managing his most valuable asset. But it just is a puzzling thing to me because I've never we said this at the stop, like, we've never really seen this where, like, a
Yeah.
GM has an asset that's an expiring guy, and they say, yeah, we're selling, we're rebuilding, we're going to trade him, and then the most valuable guy you have to sell and trade, you don't fucking
You're not
trade.
able to move, and then tell everybody that wasn't a single offer
So then you must be doing something wrong because
Yeah.
why wasn't there a single offer? You obviously aren't doing a good job of
Yeah.
selling teams on this
He
player
was
that
on he was on TSN's top
he was this top, yeah, trade. He was the top trade bait for the
for
whole
the
day
trade deadline.
today.
Yeah.
And they literally said that the deal technically with Detroit, this is what happened. Pierre LeBrun went into it. Fletcher mentioned as well in the press conference, but basically what happened is they had a deal with Detroit. It was conditional based on the fact that Detroit had to make another deal. And then once they moved that player that they were going to move, let's say hypothetically, they would come back and make the deal with the Flyers for JVR.
Mm-hmm.
And then it falls through. And you're wondering, like, is there no one else that you're getting interested in aside from Detroit, who's not even really in the playoff mix anymore? Like every other playoff team, like Vegas, Winnipeg, they're all out, and it's because they already acquired these guys that they were looking for because you were sitting asleep at the wheel essentially and didn't entertain them enough or at least promote JVR enough for them to be enticed to kind of trade for him. So I just,
Yeah.
in general, it's just not anything that inspires
He didn't even
confidence
like
for me
swat. He didn't
in
even like think.
Fletcher.
Maybe he did, but he didn't even like think to be like, "I'll give you a fourth in JVR and give me your second."
Yeah, like just to up the pick, right? Like that's what I mean too. There's no creativity either to like think
Well,
outside of the
maybe
box.
there we don't know
No, we
that,
don't
but it
know that.
seems that way from the outside to
Yeah, like
us.
you can't look at his track record and say, well, Chuck Fletcher, very creative, out of the box thinker. No, he's
Right.
very vanilla, cookie cutter. He's basically doing it by the book. And like you're saying, when he's making deals, he's usually overpaying, and when he's and he's overpaying and maybe not getting enough back when he's trading guys away. So
This is people hate on Paul Holmgren a lot, and like I've said
yeah,
this over and over again. I don't get it at all. I mean, he built a Stanley Cup contender. You guys see, it's not that easy to take a group and build a team to go to the Stanley Cup. Like it doesn't.
yeah.
It's not just because any GM comes in the league. Like people, Chuck Fletcher came in here with a Harvard degree, man for action, and still can't pull off the deals that Holmgren was able to do here. And Holmgren was in the mix for freaking everything. And yeah, he burned out the team in the end, but at least he had some gusto.
Mm-hmm.
But so let's go into the actual like I guess the press conference the after the trade deadline. He had one prior. We'll talk about the one afterwards because I think that one was a lot more interesting. But when he did mention the Fletcher, or I'm sorry, not being able to move JVR, he said, the market spoke, which I thought was a really interesting comment. And I was kind of like, one, I think it's a little bit of an insult to JVR.
To say that, yeah, exactly.
I thought, look, I will say this about Fletcher. I thought he was pretty candid.
He wasn't
More
bad, but he did say some things that you're kind of just wondering, like, what are you talking about? Like,
well, yeah. I mean, it was a little bit of squirming in his chair, and like, look, the reality is Charlie O'Connor absolutely called out
he pressed him,
Chuck
yeah.
Fletcher.
But that's, I mean, what he deserved based on
Look,
his actions. So
there's no doubt Charlie has balls to do that. I, I think it was an appropriate question. I think Fletcher avoided. So for those who were listening, Charlie O'Connor essentially going to Chuck Fletcher. Hey, do you think that the way this is not word for word, but the way that you've performed, do you think that that is indicative to, those above you that you can't get this done?
yeah,
You
and
can't you can't execute on your plan.
he was so kind of rattled by the question that he answered it once and then went back to it at the end of the press conference to answer it another time. So
Yeah, well, look, it's a good question of like, hey, do you like, are you actually capable of doing this job? And I think I think Charlie has the right to ask that question. I think it's a little bit weird, to be
it
honest with
is,
you.
yeah,
It's a
definitely.
little
But
bit of an entitlement question. It's a really difficult job. Nobody should forget this, that all of these guys get fired. Like
eventually,
they
yeah.
all get fired eventually. It's incredibly difficult. That's not me saying that Chuck Fletcher's a good GM, but I think a little bit we're kind of like going like, are you really smart enough and talented enough? Because us from the outside, it's like, okay, like I get that. And again, I think he's got balls to ask him that question. He's got guts to ask him that question. It's a difficult thing to do. And that's the one thing I'll say about Charlie. The guy has no problem asking questions. I mean, I've sat next to him. He is the most aggressive one out of everybody there to ask questions, which is why he typically asks more questions than everybody else. but I think it's a question that needed to be asked, quite
Yeah.
frankly. I don't think he was, you should expect him to answer it. But I think it was needed to be asked. We're all thinking it in our head, so props to Charlie. It's a bit fan-sided, I think, of a question, but it is for the fans. That is what he is representing there in Charlie's case. So I can appreciate the question. I don't think he did a good job answering the question. I don't even know if he understood the question. But I think it also led to like kind of the misquote, and this, I guess, not a misquote, but I guess he kind of goes off, or Fletcher goes off and says, I'm not worried about my job. I'm worried about what's best for the Flyers. And I can see people misinterpreting that, like, oh, I'm not worried that I can't be fired. I think he's absolutely worried he could be fired. In fact, I still suspect he will be, to be honest with you. Like, I don't know what I'm seeing. Like, imagine that they, that they get Connor Bedard, right? Imagine they get the first overall pick and they get Connor Bedard. Do you think that the people running this franchise are going to be like, oh, we just got this huge investment and this guy who's been middling that we want to continue, that we want to make sure we want him to continue here? I think they're secretly looking for somebody else to replace him.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Like I said, just look at the track record and you look where the team is in terms of success the past couple of years. Like any organization is going to look down and say, well, why are we in this position? And look at, who's at the helm and the decisions that were made. And they obviously weren't up to par. And that's kind of why the Flyers are where they're at, right? So it only makes sense. And I mean, when you look at the press conference and the way he kind of addressed some of these things, Charlie did ask another great question. And it was, he said there's an element where, moves can be made in the summer, but the team struggled for years. Obviously, he said to Fletcher, you're trying to stay in your position. Is there a concern that not being able to trade JVR, make any real moves, shows that you aren't able to do the rebuild you guys want to do in terms of how ownership looks like it?
That's the exact quote, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then from there, Fletcher says the goal is basically to get younger. They want to add more, assets, look to pieces in Lehigh Valley that they think they can be a part of the solution going forward. Basically, he said that, there's opportunities to get better at every trade deadline, and there weren't fair deals to be made in his opinion, but there could be deals that get made in the summer and things like that. And then from there, there's 3 questions later, he goes back and addresses that question again, which kind of shows that maybe himself, he isn't really even sure of how he answered the question. So like you're saying, kind of goes back
rattled
to...
him. It rattled him.
It rattled him.
It was a bold question, dude. It was a bold question, dude. And he didn't say it disrespectfully.
No, not at all. He said it in an insightful way.
Exactly. Yes. Look, he's pretty much saying, like, do you think that your performance is enough to keep your job?
Yeah.
That's what that question is.
Yeah, basically he said it's up to Dave Scott, essentially, and what happens. He said he's not worried about his job, but I mean,
is Dave Scott worried about his job?
Who knows,
Probably
right?
not.
Yeah, exactly. So
he might be worried about owning the Flyers, like within the, like typically you don't at that level, you don't just like lose your job. They move you on to something else first. You have to fail over and over again. And then at that point, I mean, if Dave Scott is shifted off, for some reason. But I think a lot of this stuff, dude, it's kind of like fan fiction. Like,
some of it.
We're sitting here talking about like, oh, they're gonna fire. Like, until that happens, I don't care.
That's true. It's hard to assess, right? Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I want to point this out that like majority of rumors were incorrect.
Yeah.
I just want to say that the only ones that are accurate are the ones that happen like literally right before the trade is made. And that makes sense because those guys who are looped in, they're like,
okay,
changes.
this trade's happening right now. Here it is, and that's how you get it right. Obviously,
like I don't think they're lying. No. I don't think Elliot Friedman's lying. They're calling agents. They're calling everybody they know, trying to figure out what's going on. It's a moving target. It's a broken telephone. I don't like it because I know it just makes people miserable. I didn't read 100% of the thread. I read like 50% of Chris Pronger's thread. On Twitter, I sent it over to you guys, right? Where he talks about like it's that these trade deadlines are not always a good day for everyone, and it's like the reason I don't like it, I think it makes our trade positioning worse. I think it hurts us when we're trying to trade. and I think it damages the players emotionally. And I can't imagine what JVR was going through the whole day, where he's like, "I'm going to be traded
And
all
then
day. Where am I
doesn't
going?"
actually, which is crazy.
And now he's kind of, well, now I want to get the hell out of here because
They
they wanted to
wanted to
get rid of
trade
me.
me
They
and they
wanted to get,
couldn't.
yeah.
I wonder how he feels as a player, like to know that, I've scored 20 goals in the league so many times. I've been in the playoffs and scored goals, and I've over 300 goals in the league, almost played 1,000 games,
Well,
and he couldn't get even traded at the trade deadline on an expiring deal when
I
tons
was
of other players did. How do you think he feels though, realistically? Like,
well, it's a great question because I was actually thinking about it earlier. I think one, he doesn't believe in either, right? But I also think that judging by what happens in the offseason, we will know if Chuck Fletcher was full of shit or not.
yeah, I agree. Because it'll be easy to tell. Let's say JVR goes to market and gets signed the first day of UFA.
For
Then
like $3 million a
then it
year.
kind of shows that, like, yeah, there were teams that are in on him, but Chuck Fletcher is just a shit GM and couldn't really pull it off,
Yeah.
essentially.
If he gets
But
signed for like $1 million contract or gets like a PTO,
like 15 days into the fucking free agency, then maybe there is some truth to it.
right,
That,
exactly.
honestly, that's a really interesting point, Yariv, to kind of keep an eye on, I guess, as things go along. Another thing I actually wanted to bring up, because you were talking about like how people always kind of throw Holmgren under the bus just in terms of some moves he made. There was a tweet earlier in the day that Alexander Appleyard kind of put out saying that Fletcher has the worst record under any GM in franchise history for the Flyers. So I just wanted to bring that up, that his winning percentage is a .43. The only worse GM is Russ Farewell. So that was, I believe, he was the GM from the late '80s, like '88 to like '93, and then Hextall is a .49. You get Holmgren has a .51 winning percentage. Bobby Clark, 2 tenures, and has a .59, a .58, and the best
Yeah.
ever was Allen, obviously the cup winning GM, which
Yeah.
makes sense. But it's just crazy that, like, even if you want to look to, let's say, the stats and say, well, how has the team performed under him? And technically, by the wins and losses, he's literally the worst. So based on his performance in terms of trades, signings, whatever you may be, it all correlates to the record,
We need a
right?
former player to GM this team.
If you look back at, I mean, if you look at that list,
You
they
look
had
at
the best success under former players. But if you look at any successful team in the league, it is typically under
a
former
lot of them,
guys, right? Former
yes,
players. So
they're former players. Even in Toronto, it's Brendan Shanahan's on top, and then
yeah,
Dubas.
well, you can name a ton, like Yzerman, obviously, Rob Blake, Sakic, Billy Guerin, and
In
Minnesota. I
in
mean,
our team, I mean, people might not agree with this. Thank God that Bobby Clark and Holmgren, all these guys are still involved with the team. I can't imagine how bad things would get if they weren't. I personally, I don't know. I'm not an insider there, but you
yeah.
talk about like the roots of Flyers hockey. I mean, it's hanging on by a thread right now.
Some people, for some reason, think that those guys are part of the problem, but I
I've heard
just,
that nonstop.
I
I
mean, I
also
don't.
heard Giroux wasn't elite the entire time I was here too.
Yeah, that's what I
I
mean. Until I
I
see
don't
any,
agree with the
until
consensus
the thing
almost
is,
ever.
it's all like behind the doors whispers. And well, I heard that he's actually calling the shots, but like until there's any real evidence to point me towards, I can't buy into it. And I look at their track records as GMs and think, well, they did a pretty damn good job. So
Yeah,
for them to
exactly.
be senior advisors, they might give some advice here and there, but for people to think that they're
I don't think they're that
actively
involved.
on a
No.
day to day, like, yeah, okay,
I would
put this into
imagine people
perspective.
in Chuck Fletcher's
Wait, wait,
life
wait.
are
Put
more
put this
impactful.
put this into perspective here, guys. Bobby Clark removed himself from the Hall of Fame committee that votes people into the NHL Hall of Fame. That's like a committee where you do no work or basically anything. Once a year you meet and you vote people in the Hall of Fame. Do you think this guy wants to be involved in running the Flyers on a day-to-day basis? I don't know, man. Just like it
No,
doesn't
but
seem it doesn't
I
seem too evident there just based off that.
I could see him picking up the phone and being annoying
I could see that, yeah, for
to
sure.
being to the same way we are.
Yeah, be like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that?
You couldn't move anybody. Like
An extra voice,
what
but it's true.
happened?
I mean, extra voices in somebody's ear could give a lot to think about for his perspective in terms of Fletcher as a GM. So that might be hard to deal with. But if you
Remember
can't sift through that and that affects you and makes you pull off all these like underwhelming moves, then you're not really suited for the position nonetheless. I don't think so.
yeah,
It's tough to navigate like what's happening here. Really, I just think the easy
We
thing to
were
point.
flying high a few weeks ago when the Flyers were winning.
I know, right? But it's easy to point at things. I mean, to say that they're all
I,
bad,
yeah,
obviously, because a lot of bad things have happened over this last week, specifically in terms of the trade deadline. There's
I
still
think
a
they're
lot
kind
of
of. I think they're kind of good.
there's still a lot of young assets that they have that are promising a lot of young players. I just think a lot of people see Chuck Fletcher at the helm and say, well, with this guy here, how's it ever going to get better? And I can't really say,
that.
and I
Yes,
can't really look at them and be like, well, you're wrong because they're 100% right. How could it get better with this guy here who can't really make any distinguishable or moves that really make you confident in anything that he's doing? I just, yeah, I don't know, man.
no, I hear. I see. This is what I was worried about, that this episode would just turn into a bitch fest about Chuck Fletcher.
But it kind of
Uh,
has, but
I,
I
I
mean,
I don't
yeah,
feel like the trade deadline is what like set me off. I was kind of, when they were like losing, I was kind
yeah,
of like, okay, now we're getting right back into that conversation with the picks. Now we move the players that we can. We go young. We probably crash and burn, because that's what happens when you go young.
yeah.
Go we end up with the best draft pick we can get, and we take it from there. And that's kind of how I see it. Like, I'm not as panicked about like we need to draft at the very top of the draft and we need to
No, they're
have
gonna
all.
get a good player where they're at, even at 8, in my
Well,
opinion. So
it's not even just that. It's like there's so many opportunities to improve your team.
I just don't
Yet
know if he can find and
that
make those opportunities. Is what I'm saying.
that's the look. That is the worry. Do I think everybody in this organization is incompetent?
Is it or
No.
inept? Yeah, no, no,
No.
definitely not.
So that's why I was kind of like, it's not possible that they're not going to find anybody. Is he a guy who's really going to push us forward? I don't know. I have a feeling he's not going to be here very long, though.
I just think based off the press conference and like when somebody brings up questions about job security, say, "Well, I'm not worried." How many times do you see the guy saying that I'm not worried is actually in the same position like 4 or 5 months down the line?
Well,
Usually not.
I
So
think
we'll
he
see,
used the
right?
wrong terminology. He shouldn't, because he said, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the Flyers.
Yeah,
But I don't think he meant like I'm not worried that I could, like, he knows that he's on the hot seat. I think he's saying like I'm not focused on if I could lose my
yeah. I'm
job,
focused on the
because if
team and trying to make them better and all
because
that.
he's trying to tell us, hey, if I operate from a position of fear, I'm going to make the
Yeah.
wrong decisions.
Which is fair. And he did say that, he didn't want to get backed into corners to make moves for the sake of
He
making
didn't make
moves.
a bad move. He just
No.
didn't make any great ones
Yeah, which is a common theme.
almost ever.
Yeah, which is a common theme. But I think what it is just like to see a guy have an asset in JVR that you can't sell to, beat the drum again here. It's just unfathomable to me. Like, you don't see a GM in this whole league do that. So it's just like, do we have, like, I just want to
Do
ask
we
this
have the
question
worst
out there.
GM in
Yeah,
the NHL?
do we? And I looked at TSN, like these guys on the panel, when they were kind of addressing after the trade deadline. Well, the big news of the day is actually the trade that wasn't made. And it looked like they were kind of like chuckling almost that how could you not trade a JVR? Like they were puzzled by it even too.
We're
And
always being made
yeah.
fun of.
And I just wonder, man, like, how long, like, how long does it go on where the Flyers are kind of the laughing stock, or like you have the worst GM before the ownership just says, you know what, like this guy it can't happen any longer.
We were always known for being crazy,
Yeah.
but we weren't like crazy. It was like, oh, they didn't trade JVR crazy. It was like, oh, they
made some nuts trade for like a bunch of players, and we'll see how it works
they
out.
traded a bunch of players in and out, and they did all this stuff, and they went for the best. Oh, and they went for an aging Yager, and they, you know what I mean? Like we were the ones that took risks, and now we're just like
not even doing that, or not even doing anything really.
We're like the little engine that could.
Well, we tried. I made 17
Couldn't.
phone calls. I made 17 phone calls, but I couldn't get an offer for a 4th-round pick. That was the exact quote that he said. Basically, like, it's kind of crazy. I've never seen a GM say that in a press conference.
I was surprised he said that too.
Like counted the calls. My point. Like,
well, that sounds like a man who's trying to be like, look, I did do my job.
I'm like, but you didn't execute.
But that's what
right?
Somebody says before they get fired.
That's what I mean. Look, I did do it, but no. If you didn't actually execute and you just tried, did you actually do it, or did you fail at doing it? And that's the real question, right?
I don't think if this was an outlier and like oh really, then people would be like, okay, well he's done a good job.
Constant thing, common theme, like
right. Like I said, it's a constant poke, and people are just ready to explode. And I think you saw that, like, Charlie O'Connor is a Flyers fan.
Yeah.
Like, that question is sitting in his gut because he's sitting in our gut because we want to win a championship. We're like, hey, dude, can you actually do this? Like,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think so,
are you
man,
as good as
obviously.
I am? And I'm like new to this, you know?
What do you think? Do you think we actually have the worst GM in the league just based on his whole track record, what you've seen? Like, I don't know if it's the worst, but it's definitely close at this point.
It's in the conversation.
Yeah, it's a possible reality, which is I didn't think we would be in this point. I didn't really think it would get this bad, but man, it's definitely this is the thing though.
I don't think anything
Yeah,
really happened. I
that's
think
the
we're
thing, right? We're kind of overblowing a little bit now, but like
yeah.
in a sense, what we can say is like the trade deadline, major disappointment. Basically, anything in terms of trades, if you're looking at it for Fletcher, usually isn't something that you're going to get a positive out of. But the one positive I will say is, I mean, I like their drafting. I do like the young assets that they have in terms of like the drafting that they've done. Have they done a good job of building their draft capital? No. They have some young pieces. Jamie asked him a great question actually about Cutter Gauthier, if he was going to sign him, if it's the right time to sign him, kind of to give the fan base some hope. And they said they're assessing everything. He kind of gave him basically like a blah blah, we'll look at it type of answer. Like we're going to assess everything and see what. But I do think it's a great question from Jamie because the fan base is pissed. So you have to do something to placate them, obviously, and try to get them back on your side somehow.
I think Jamie was trying to get some hope.
Yeah, exactly. Which is that's why I love the question. And I personally think that he probably will sign. I wouldn't be surprised. I just think they don't want to tip their hand on that right away because who knows how long they're going to go and how far they'll go
can't afford to.
In the playoffs, right? Yeah. So they don't want to do that, and then they make it all the way and they don't sign him. So I definitely understand not making the promise or anything or like saying, yep, we're definitely looking forward to doing that. But I just think, like I said, Cutter Gauthier is somebody to be excited about. Tyson Forster, Desnoyers, Sam Erston. They have a lot of young guys that are looking pretty good, but it's just, they say they need to add a high-end talent and do this and do that. But realistically, like, is this the guy who's going to be able to find them that high-end talent or find them the pieces they need to kind of get back to contention and back to being relevant in this league? And I just don't know if he's the guy. Basically.
No, you're sugarcoating it. He's not the guy.
I know he's not the guy, but it is what it is, man.
You're hoping that he can be the guy, but yeah, so far we have not seen anything that shows that he is that guy.
We can't insinuate the guy's going to be fired just based off his like what he's done. Technically, I mean it's terrible, but he still has a job, so
he's the one going forward. I mean, he's in fire territory. I mean,
he's in fireable territory for sure. Yeah.
Yes. Look, I was saying about AV for a while. It took longer to fire AV than we thought, but it happened.
Think he's gone after the season, Fletcher?
Yes.
What are we thinking? Yeah, I'm saying the same thing. He's definitely probably gone.
I mean, how many times do you have to fall? They might like him. They might just shift him off. I don't know.
You think they're going to shift him up to president? Fuck.
I don't know.
I mean, how do you get promoted after the job that he's
I don't know if he would be a bad president. I just don't know if he makes a good GM.
Yeah, I don't know. This is the thing. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if he makes a bad president, but he definitely isn't a good negotiator of any sort in terms of trades. And that's a key component to being a good general manager.
You got to look, people can look back and be upset about Sean Couturier's injuries. But like, again, we knew what Sean Couturier was worth on the open market. Like, look at what these other guys have signed for. He signed Couturier for under $8 million a year.
Yeah, it's a pretty good deal.
Joel Farabee, who, by the way, was an explosive player the same way Boldy is right now, got $7.5 million, I think.
Yeah, before the injury. Yeah.
Yeah. Farabee got $5 million. He didn't get monstrous contracts here. So he's been all right at some of the stuff that he's done. That's why I said you can't say he's like fucking absolute complete incompetent idiot. He's just not a great GM. He's not a good GM. He's not a good
trading, not finding.
He's not doing a good job here.
Yeah,
even by the numbers. Even if you want to give him a benefit of the doubt, by the numbers,
and look at the winning record, dude.
Yeah,
the worst record of any Flyers GM in history. So
yeah, and the players you bring over, you can't even really. They're not like gaining value. Like some of them are. Like Tippett is.
Yeah,
Tippett's worth a lot more now than he was last year.
I mean, has technically gained value, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I noticed that people are trying to discredit like everything. Like, oh, again, it's this whole like, oh, the Flyers. This one kind of annoyed me about this is that like the
Yeah.
Flyers were winning and everybody's like, oh my god, maybe this franchise is going in the right direction. Then they had a losing spurt, which we knew inevitably was happening. Like we
Yeah.
talked about it. They had a losing spurt right at the trade deadline, and then they're both falling short. So now that everything sucks, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, no,
No, like we were saying throughout
everything matters.
yeah,
The
like we were
winning streak
saying
and the losing streaks.
like
Sorry,
we
go
are
ahead.
saying, no, my bad. I'm cutting you
No.
off. Like we are saying throughout, the episode, like obviously the trade deadline is the main piece here because it's a trade deadline show that we're doing kind of a recap. But
Is it? It feels like Chuck Fletcher's.
Chuck
Fuck
Fletcher,
you. Yeah,
Chuck, fuck
sorry.
you to Chuck Fletcher, yeah. But anyway, I mean, we kind of went through, that there is prospects, there are things to look at and kind of be positive about. And another thing kind of add on to that we haven't mentioned is Couturier apparently was pushing his rehab skating today and kind of shooting pucks and
Yeah.
things like that. So that's something to look at and say
And,
potentially maybe he comes back for some games just to kind of see where he's at
and
there. So that's a good thing.
well, let's add to that also the tweet that Cam Atkinson had yesterday,
Yeah.
where he said, "Don't worry, I'm coming back," with like a winky face, like a silly winky face, like
Yeah.
you know. I know a lot of people want to count everybody out and everything is the worst thing ever. Again, it's a huge X factor to our season. Like Sean Couturier, I mean, you add both of those guys onto this team. We're not in the same position that we're in. We're not in like a dominant position, but we're not at the bottom of the league. Probably in a worse position draft wise. Maybe 13th. Or not
Yeah.
13th. Maybe 16th.
Yeah.
17th or whatever. No, I'm thinking it backwards. Yeah, like 13th, 12th position, which would be worse, but we would be in that conversation. Maybe we would have traded for somebody, right, that we didn't really need. So like
Yeah.
that didn't happen this year.
Which is good. You didn't waste assets. You didn't add too many, but I mean,
Well,
everything that
like
could be done there, I guess.
yeah, but again, if we can add, like I know people don't think we'd have anybody in the system. We do have some stuff in the system. Our pool is running dry. It runs out dry quickly because a lot of these guys didn't develop the way we thought. And one of the only other trades we made for the trade deadline, which we didn't really talk about, was Isaac Ratcliffe.
Future considerations.
Yeah, he's moved out for future considerations. This is a guy that we moved up in the draft to draft, by the
Was
way.
a 50 goal scorer in junior, yeah.
Yes. This is a guy who at one point was ranked as a first round player. I'm not saying he should be like a dominant, but this is a guy who was most likely going to be a third line player in the NHL, maybe a second line player in the NHL.
Even as early as last year, there was promising
Would have been
signs.
it would have been at least another Greenway.
Yeah, well, I mean, promising signs last year, right? Gets called up, plays on the first line with Giroux, looks decent, then just a total downward spiral for him and his development, and he just makes you wonder, like the development, and what they're doing with some players. Like, are there things?
But
on
other hand, some players are developing really well.
Yeah, so it's hard to pinpoint, right? You can look at the bad, you can look at the good. Like, look at Tippett, for example. Look at a Frost who've taken steps. Look at a Cam York, and then look at another guy. Sometimes NHL's a hard league. NHL's a hard league. Not every guy who has potential and talent is gonna always make it, right?
But the Ratcliffe one is so weird. How is it that you're constantly progressing forward? You play in the NHL, everybody's happy with you, and then the next year you're not producing at all. He has 2 goals or whatever halfway through the AHL season, and then just it gets moved for nothing.
It's tough. There's really not an explanation. Honestly.
Hey, look, I like Ron Hextall. I mean, we both liked him. I liked a lot of his drafting. Look, the reality is he picked a lot of guys that did not materialize.
Yeah.
And yes, maybe the Flyers are responsible for that in their development cycle, but the reality is that's what we did. Yes, I do believe that that Nolan Patrick's career was really limited because of the injuries, right? It wasn't because he was a horrible pick.
No, he was a talented player. He just when he kept injured that often, it's hard to kind of establish yourself as an NHLer, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But at the same time, that's the guy we picked, and it's another one, and another one, and then another one. It's like, okay, guys, you get excuses,
but not that many.
Right. Exactly. That's the point. At a certain point, like you're making your own luck here.
Yeah.
And it's funny, we fired our head of scouting since then, right? Like Chris Pryor is not here anymore.
No, yeah.
He now runs the Penguins. So this is new head of scouting, right? Flair's I think done a pretty good job so far.
Yeah.
But
I think
there's
they've done decent drafting. They just haven't had that like first line bona fide guy. I mean, Cutter obviously is the guy you point to for that, but
well, we don't even know what they have yet.
that's true, right?
And I'm not, and I'm sorry, I'm not jumping on you. I'm getting really tired of the narrative that like everybody all of a sudden, everybody, not you, Vasili, but like everybody I listen to, they're all wizards. Like everybody knows
Oh
everything that's gonna
no. I
happen
mean,
for the
I know what
next
you
two,
mean.
4 or 5 years, and they know that this team's not ready, and they're interpreting everything that Tortorella said, and Tortorella is saying that it's going to be 4 years out, and it's very clear, and it's like, okay, well, like nobody knows what's going to happen or where the solutions are going to come from.
Well, yeah.
You can
I
say
just
you don't
mean
have faith in the group doing it. That's a different story.
yeah.
But don't
I
tell me 4 years. You don't know 4 years. It could take 10 years. If they're
I,
that bad, it could take forever. Sorry.
I think it's definitely overblown. I mean, like I can name a handful of guys, for example, like Cutter Gauthier could be a top line guy. He actually, though, was given the pedigree of that. I mean, Tyson Forster could be a top line guy. Bobby Brink could be a top line guy. Right? Like, there's guys that you look at that you could say, well, they could turn into a top line player. I think it's just a lot of people they see guys that don't have the pedigree of that, right? Like a Forster didn't come into the draft with a pedigree of like, okay, I'm gonna be a bona fide first liner. Same with the Bobby Brink. But that's not to say that they can't be that because if you look at their production in the AHL, it translates to that and it could be more at the NHL level, right? And that's how development works. So I think that's what it is, and I think it is overblown to your point where like they have good young talented guys. They just haven't gotten an extended look or shot at the NHL level yet,
Well,
which is a good thing because they're handling their development the right way. I think before they were rushing a lot of guys up. I think now they're taking more of their time, which we've seen in the past with the NHL when you take your time with players, you place them in the AHL, put them in the right positions to really succeed and develop their skills in their game, that they can become contributors for you at a high level in the NHL, right? So I think
yeah.
to that extent, they've been doing a little bit of a better job, I think, lately anyway. But
Yeah, for sure. I mean, uh,
it's hard to be
I
positive, but
no,
there's some things that are okay, right?
yeah, no, absolutely. It's just like I don't know where to go for like I don't know what to talk about
Yeah.
from here really with the Flyers because like we have to just wait and see
Yeah, it is a
a
wait and
lot of
see
this
situation.
stuff.
Basically, it's wait till the offseason, see what happens with Fletcher, then you really go forward. And then from there, kind of assess what they have if a new guy comes in. Or if not, I mean, they have to do a better job of evaluating what they have and seeing what they need to move forward with and seeing and trying to be more creative with what they can try to get in here for like high end talent things. And we'll see if Fletcher will be around to do that. My guess is he probably won't be, but who really knows what's going to happen. Um, I was thinking the Yariv, our last segment, you want to just go over some of the big trades
That's
that kind of
exactly what I
happened?
was. Yeah, that's exactly what I was just about to transition us to.
Awesome,
So
man.
yeah, so let's end on go through some of the big trades that we had. We do not need to go through all of them. There's
Oh,
way too many. But I have a few written here, and obviously you can bring up any other ones that come to mind. But we'll start with let's just start with like teams a little bit here. But Boston, obviously they've had some serious injuries. I think Marchand got injured the other night as
Marchand,
well.
Taylor Hall, and Foligno all out. So
Yeah, all out. Don't have timelines on any of them. I'm sure Marchand will probably be back, but I know the other two are long term. But they do go out and add. Obviously, they added Orlov earlier.
which
They
has been
are.
great for them. He's ripping it up. So
Yeah, I mean he's a good defenseman. Garrett Hathaway, I believe.
yeah,
And then they added recently Tyler Bertuzzi,
I like
a
that.
guy who's struggling this year but had a career year last year, which another interesting, probably divisive player. Probably going to work out for the Bruins. I think they hit 100 points faster than any team in NHL
Yeah, they
history.
did. I think 61 games it took them. The record was 62. So yeah, it's crazy.
Insane.
They have tons of depth. I love the Bertuzzi acquisition for them. I think what did they give up? Was it a first round pick?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, so it's not too bad. I mean, they're giving a first up, but they're cup bound and they're essentially going for a cup, right? So it only makes sense for them to try to add, especially with injuries coming up. And Bertuzzi's almost like a Marchand light. for them. It's like having two almost of the same like asshole that you don't want to deal with in the corner who's like hacking and slash. Like they're not going to be fun, man, to play
No.
against in the playoffs. So yeah, the trade was conditional first round pick in 2024 and a fourth round pick in 2025. I think the condition on the first one is it's lottery protected. So.
Yeah. A lot of the conditions around stuff is lottery
Jacob
protected.
Voracek traded to the Coyotes. I wanted to mention, and that's like probably means
Yeah.
the end of his career. And typically the
Where
Coyotes do
all
this.
injured players go to die.
Yeah, because
Arizona.
there's a portion of the LTI cap where they can meet the salary cap floor. So they kind of basically traded for Voracek so they could put his money to the salary cap floor and then trade Nick Bjugstad off to Edmonton. And it sucks for Jake, man, because like I've loved to watch him play. Obviously, great player, and it just to know that you're never going to see him play again.
Why
It's
can't we get
shitty.
Arizona? Like,
To do
can
that with
Arizona take
Ellis?
Ellis?
Jamie brought that up, and I thought, man, it's a great point because, like, why wouldn't you be sniffing around when you're trying to get younger and shed salary? And just goes back to our point. We wanted to like get away from Chuck Fletcher, the negativity, but just goes back to the point that the guy does not have a creative bone in his body when it comes to making trades or thinking creatively and how to get the team out of the mess that they're kind of in terms of the salary cap, anyways. But.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. Yeah. So Jake Voracek, obviously another one, and it's a shame, man, that his career had to probably end that way. But
I know.
Cam Atkinson's career is also hanging on by a thread at this point. So
Yeah, so it looks like both guys potentially. Another big one happened actually today. John Klingberg goes to the Wild for
right,
Andre
that
Schuster.
happened at the end. That was like a
Yeah,
315 deal.
yeah, Nikita Nesterenko and a fourth round pick. So that's probably one of the biggest one. Probably the biggest one of today, essentially. So that's a really good trade for the Wild. They already have a pretty solid defense.
And he's gonna have a good offensive season at least.
Yeah, especially on the Ducks, who aren't really that great. They're basically
Yeah.
one of the worst teams. So, like, for him to be putting up really much of any offensive production on that
We need
team,
the Ducks to lose today. They're playing Montreal.
basically, yeah. Flyers, I mean, you got to hope for the best lottery luck here, but that's another big trade. I like it for the Wild just because, I mean, if you look at their defense, they have Spurgeon already, Dumba, fuck, who else? What's
Rodin.
his? Brodin, yes, I love Brodin. So you have Klingberg and Brodin together, two Swedish defensemen there. So I'm sure, I mean, the chemistry will be there for those guys, and Klingberg will help them on the power play. So
Yeah.
I think it's good for the Wild. And any other big deals you want to mention here?
Well, I have the one here. Jacob Brana.
Oh
Also
yeah,
got it traded, which was kind of a weird one. And I was listening to Eklund's Hockey Buzz podcast. I always love their trade deadline when it's just a bunch of writers on there.
oh
Just
yeah, it's
bullshitting
fun.
for hours. It's better than Sportsnet, to be honest with you, because they don't stop talking about hockey. They're just always talking about trade, so like I enjoy
Yeah.
it. But oh my god, Kevin, oh my god, his name.
Allen.
Kevin Allen. Thank you. Oh my god, I can't believe I just forgot his name. He's been on this podcast, by the way. He's awesome.
He's a great writer.
He's so
Legendary.
smart. But he actually brought up a great point. He's like, how does this make the assistance program look? Like this guy goes through the assistance program and then gets like just traded away for like bare minimum peanuts. After admitting he has a problem. I feel like that's gonna end up coming back to haunt like the NHL kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
The PA, I feel like is gonna have something to say about that. But
That he's taken out so soon and then just traded away.
yeah.
Yeah.
I will say Eiserman is smart as shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot of really interesting.
Would you have been in on that? For like, obviously the Flyers would have to take Cap.
No.
Red Wings, you wouldn't have been in on Vrana.
Maybe. I don't know his situation enough, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't even know what he did to piss off Eiserman.
I don't know. I mean, he went to the player assistance program, so obviously that's a factor into things. I don't know in terms of
I think
like
he had like an incident.
Yeah, obviously
something.
Something's happening for sure. I think there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. So do you want to bring that into your organization? Obviously, the Blues are doing it as like a low risk, high reward type thing.
The only reason I wouldn't is because we're not in a position to take on that because we already have so many headaches here. If I was a stable organization, yeah, if I had like a position where I'm like, you know what, he might fit in that spot. Yeah. This might be worth the chance.
I get it from the Blues perspective because I mean they've won a cup recently. They're probably in a better situation organizationally, maybe than the Flyers.
That's what I mean. Exactly. I mean they kind of are. like even though they traded away assets, they still have kind of like a relatively
They got a lot of
intact
picks
core.
back. They're trying to do kind of a on the fly rebuild. They have 3 first
Right.
rounders
They're
in this
more
upcoming
set
draft,
up. Well, they're more set up for an on the fly rebuild
which is
than the Flyers.
crazy because that's what the Flyers should be doing. They should be trying to go for that type of thing where they have a ton of picks.
I
I mean,
think that is what they're doing.
they got 2 first rounders at least next year, I guess, to look forward to. So
Yeah.
hopefully a second for Jay O'Brien, but they have to do a file some special arbitration. So
But that's for next year, right?
this year or next year, if they want to get the second rounder this year, they have to file the arbitration and try to terminate the contract beforehand.
Okay.
Which I don't know if they're going to do that because they haven't filed it as of yet. And it seems like Fletcher isn't a man of action, so who knows if they'll do anything, obviously.
Other moves that were made, Jonathan Quick ended up in Vegas after.
That's awesome for him, considering the situation.
I don't know if he's going to be. I don't think he's going to be starting there. I don't even know if he's going to be backup, but I think it's a good move for Vegas. It pisses off their opponent and
some insurance because they have guys that are in net that don't.
He's a Stanley Cup Hall of Famer.
But the guys they have in net, like Aiden Hill and Logan Thompson, like they do not have any playoff experience, barely, right? If they do have any, so
exactly.
At least you have a guy who's won a cup, right? So
yeah. So I thought that was a nice move on their part. I think the Caps getting Sandin.
That was super underrated, man.
Well, so I have 2 thoughts on it. Okay, one hand could work out. Rasmus Sandin could end up being awesome. And then they show victory. And then I think back to the Philadelphia Flyers trading the 19th pick in the draft for Steve Eminger for the Caps, where the Caps ended up taking John Carlson and the Flyers ended up getting Steve Eminger.
Yeah, the Leafs could get a good pick, right? Because I mean, they're not going to be like.
But that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the risk you take. But I think it was a good move. They needed to get younger.
Sorry, Reva. I was gonna say I always thought Sandin has had a lot of talent. I mean, he has 20 points, obviously, with the Leafs this year. They're a really good team, so you got to factor that into it. But I mean, he was a first round pick himself, 29th overall. I always thought that he was going to be one of those sneaky good, like offensive defensemen. Yeah. Who also could, play really well in transition and just has like speed to his game. So for the Caps, I think it's good. For the Leafs, it makes sense because they basically traded all the
Caps are retooling.
Yeah,
on the fly here.
Basically, they're trading a lot of their guys that you would thought they would have kept to kind of make a push at the playoffs, but I think they've kind of realized they're not going to be in it this year, just with a lot of the injuries they've had to some of their star guys. So
they have no defensemen under contract next year except for Sandin and
Carlson, right?
John Carlson.
So we'll see what kind of moves they make. It's interesting. Interesting perspective because Backstrom's coming off that big injury. Ovechkin's getting older, so I'm kind of interested to see what they do. But for the Leafs, I mean, it's a good move because they basically traded away like every single draft pick they've had for the last 3 seasons, so they get one back.
Do you think Ovi would want to, if like the Caps started rebuilding? Do you think Ovi would prefer to chase that goal scoring streak on another team?
No, I think he's going to stay with the Caps, but I think they're kind of saying to Ovi,
we can get something for him.
I think they're saying to Ovi, we need to step back this year and make some picks in the draft, see what we can do in free agency, and then try to assess. Like I think they're trying to say we're going to turn it around quick, probably.
And they can. I mean, I believe that I don't think that they're going to turn around quickly to be a Stanley Cup team, but they can turn around quickly to be a playoff team again.
I agree. Yeah, that's
they're kind of clinging to the end of this era. You know,
same with the Penguins, core. I guess. Too,
yes,
right?
Yeah, and eventually it's gonna fall off the rails, but for now they seem to be doing all right. So I guess we didn't really talk about the Devils getting Timo Meier. I guess that's
a little bit we did, yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a big deal. I think he is going to add to them. Again, the way I see with the Devils, their weaknesses is their youth and their lack of high-end goaltending, or I guess the most stable goaltending. Obviously, this team is built to compete for several years. And that's why I really like the Timo Meier pickup for them. They have their team established. They can fit it in. They have the extra assets. They can afford to move Mahatmadula. They have other, like they didn't move Nemec, obviously.
He's a point-a-game guy. And I mean, they're obviously in contention. And when you have,
He's a
the
goal
space.
scorer, man.
Yeah, exactly. When you have the space that they have and the talent that they have, why wouldn't you make a move in the position that they're in to kind of add to that group? So
Yeah,
for the
and
Devils, as much as I hate to say it, for the Devils, it's a great move. I don't think there's been a contract extension announced as of yet, so I'm assuming they probably will sign him. But obviously, who knows? Because I do know they have to sign Jesper Bratt as well, so that'll be interesting.
I think they will definitely be signing Meyer. They wouldn't have given up those assets to get him
Yeah,
if they
for
weren't
sure,
planning on re-signing him.
for
Now with
sure.
the not the if they were like this was their third or fourth year of like competing in the playoffs and they needed something to get over the hump, okay, maybe. But the
Yeah.
fact that they were finally breaking out, like this was a team that was
It's
like
going
the
to be
Flyers last
a
year.
big signing for them, yeah. And then
Exactly.
I guess the other one to bring up is obviously Patrick Kane, going to the
Yes.
Rangers. He didn't really get traded for too much, which is interesting to me, despite the fact that like he's Patrick Kane. It wasn't the biggest return. I don't even think he got. Did he get a first round pick or was
The
it conditional? Conditional.
conditional is most
Yeah.
likely a second and potentially could turn into a first.
What has happened? They have to make the
I think they have to win the Stanley Cup or make the
win the
Stanley
cup.
Cup or
Okay,
something like that.
yeah. I mean, the Rangers
I
have a good
think
team.
maybe I made that up. I might have made that up.
I think it's close to that. So they make the conference final or win the cup. It's like one of the two. Is what I
Yeah,
remember.
we
So
should probably check that, but I don't feel like it right now.
yeah, it's okay. You gotta really search it up. But I think for them it's obviously a good move. You're adding Patrick Kane plus Tarasenko earlier, so like
What
tons
do
of
you
offensive
what
prowess. I
what do you
wonder
think
how it's
about
gonna
it?
mesh. I wonder how it's gonna mesh. I don't know.
I don't know if like
Him and Panarin should be good together. They played together in the
yeah,
past.
my whole
So,
thing is like how great defensively is that top six now? Because like Kane isn't good defensively. Tarasenko
Tarasenko
isn't very
isn't.
good defensively.
It's really up to Kreider,
And Aaron's
Trocheck.
not great
It's really up
defensively.
to basically you have three guys that are not good at all defensively, and you're leaving it all up to
You
Zibanejad, Kreider, and what's his name
well,
there?
what
Fuck, I forget, but it's
I
okay.
think it's going to take a little bit of time because you're adding such big personalities onto there. But I don't
Yeah,
look at those additions and be like, oh, they're clearly the team to beat. Now on paper, they don't have a hole. So that
no,
is
yeah,
important, right? I mean, they have Shesterkin and Ned, even though he's not having the same season he had last year, he's still Shesterkin. You know what I mean? Like, this is what I say about Carter Hart. Like, I don't
yeah,
care what his numbers are. This is an elite guy, right? Like, Shesterkin is arguably the best goalie in the league right now, just off his numbers from last year. Him, Vasilevsky, right? He's in the conversation. They obviously have Adam Fox and a very competent defense, if core, and then they have a very competent offensive core. So just like a lot of the other really good teams on paper, they're stacked, but they're not like as well balanced as a Boston.
no, yeah.
I would even say I would take Toronto over the Rangers
I think
potentially.
the Leafs could beat the Rangers. You got to wonder with them like
Yeah, I guess
Shesterkin
Shesterkin.
hasn't had the best season, and goalies always get hot. So, like, is he going to get hot at the right time? Right? Is he going to get hot for the playoffs?
He's a
So,
star. Like when you imagine he would step
yeah,
his game up.
I could see it happen. And then just to dial back, that first round pick in the trade. So the condition is if the Rangers win two playoff rounds this spring, it could be a 2024, 2025 first round pick. They have the selection, the Blackhawks.
Okay.
So that would be basically the details on that. But it'll be interesting. I think they'll mesh pretty well. But I think like you were saying, I look at their center depth and I think like other teams in the East got better center depth than them, like the Leafs, for example, like Boston, for example. I would stack them up. So who knows if they'll be able to get through those teams if they do end up facing them, even Tampa. I think it's a lot of it will be probably on the goaltending and how it stacks up. I'm
So,
interested, man. The playoffs are going to shape up very interesting, especially in the East this year.
well, a team that's interesting because like on paper they don't really have big holes either is like the Sens, right?
You think they'll make playoffs or?
Well, if they make the playoffs, the addition of Chikrin's huge. Let's be
Oh,
honest.
I think that's even beyond this year is huge for them, right?
Oh,
Because he signed for 2
absolutely.
years, so it's a
Well,
great deal.
obviously they're adding to that core group, right? That the large group of players that you need to
Yeah,
win a Stanley Cup. But like that's a team that I wouldn't be surprised would be a headache to play in the playoffs to some degree.
yeah.
Just these teams that kind of have filled out rosters. I think those are the ones that are going to be the hardest to defeat. And even like
Yep.
a team like Edmonton, they're a lot more filled out than they used to be.
Now they added
Um,
Ekholm and they got a couple other pieces in there as
yeah,
well.
Ekholm is exactly what they needed.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Is exactly what they
You know what
needed.
I'm surprised about actually is the Avalanche didn't really make any real
Uh,
additions.
do you know what I think it is though? I think the Avalanche, the dark horse of the playoffs in a way. They're the
Yeah.
defending champions, but their status in the league is kind of an illusion right now because they started off so poorly.
They're playing really well now, though.
That's what I'm saying. So it looks like they're not one of the upper echelon teams in the league.
They are. They just have tons of injuries, man.
But exactly, but they are. So when it comes to the playoffs, like they didn't have to add because the West did not go into this arms race.
No, the East did. Yeah,
the East freaked out, and because everybody knows how good the East is. That they're like, well, we have to improve because all the best teams are in the East right now.
You think the East finally gets the cup back this year?
Yeah. I think unless it's Colorado. That's the only team I could see. I mean, maybe Dallas. Dallas had a good move. Oh, they picked up Max Domi.
Yeah, they made some good additions. They got Domi in there, Dabnov. So I mean, they've added for sure.
Domi is an interesting player because he produces
49 points in 60 games right now.
He produces pretty much everywhere, but like he can't stick anywhere because he's a center. He's undersized. He's not the most disciplined.
Yeah.
And like I even look at like the Flyers options for next year, and like the only options I really saw out there were like for center with Max Domi and JT Compher.
Yeah. And well, it was Larkin, but obviously he got signed. So.
Right. Well, I never thought
we kind of predicted that was going to happen. Does Yzerman let a captain go? He's as good as him? Not really.
Every season is the same thing. People look at the beginning of the year and they look at the UFA list and they go, "Oh, these are the guys that I'm like, these guys aren't making it."
Yeah.
David Pastrnak wasn't making it to free agency for a reason.
Yeah. He's on the best player, and he's on the best team in the league. Why would he want to leave?
But also as a team, okay? Like think about it. If you see this player and you're like, "Oh, that's the player I covet," and they're in a position to keep him, why would they even bother to let him hit?
Especially when you're the best team in the league this season. Like, why would you change any of the formula up? You're literally the best team. Technically, like we said, they're the fastest team to 100 points in NHL history. Why would they ever change the formula up?
But even Detroit, like. Okay, you're a team of a bunch of mid 20-year-old guys. Your captain is in his mid 20s. He's the leader of your team. Why would you let him go?
Yeah, exactly. That's
what world.
It speaks for itself, right? We kind of laid it out.
That's why
prior weeks, right? Like, what's the chances something like that's going to happen?
That's why I really don't like this revisionist history with Sean Couturier, where people are going, "Oh, see, he should have traded Sean Couturier in his last year."
Would you have got to replace him? Yeah.
Who the fuck does that?
Yeah, exactly.
What are you talking about? I hear a lot of revisionist, and I hear this from people I think who are smart. I'm like,
I thought that was
what are you talking about? People don't do that. It's not a good idea.
I will say that deal and that signing was a great signing. I mean, he would have got way more money on the open market, and he had.
We all thought he was getting 9.5.
He had no injury history before. He just happened to get injured. It's just shit luck, unfortunately. It just really is what it is.
That's really what it's been, and that's where I worry that like Fletcher is making our luck.
Making the shit luck, yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess we'll see what happens. Personally, I don't expect him to be around after the season, but we'll see how it goes. Obviously, underwhelming trade deadline, and we said on previous episodes, like, you know, if the Flyers couldn't trade JVR for a second-round pick, it was a failure. They didn't even trade him at all, so it's a complete and utter failure on the front office's end, in my estimation. And we'll see where it goes from here. Yeah.
Fun stuff. All right, let's wrap it up on here. It's next week already, right, with Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we booked this already. So we have Steve Corniano's coming back on next week. You got a double episode this week, obviously, because of the trade deadline. This is an extra special episode for no reason. But next week we're gonna do draft talk.
Like a lot of draft talk, like the stuff you want to hear, like the nitty gritty.
Yes.
This is the guy who's like projected to be 15th overall, and this is what he does really well. And Steve goes in depth, guys. So.
I already gave him a heads up. I'm like, dude, we're talking draft. We're talking Flyers picks. Like, that's what we're talking.
Yeah, like draft the whole time.
Totally you know what he responded? The only thing he said to me was too easy. I was like,
let's go. I'm already excited, man. It's always a great time with Steve.
I know. Dude, his podcasts have been so good. So he started podcasting, and I don't know if you noticed.
Yeah.
His Timo Meyer episode, dude, I could listen to him talk all day.
He's awesome, man.
He starts off, he goes, Is anybody fucking watching hockey?
Yeah,
He's like, who the hell is talking about this analysis that San Jose lost this trade? He goes, have you guys even watched any of these guys?
It was
play?
a really
any of
trade
them?
for them. Yeah.
It was, and nobody know. But that's the thing.
And people were saying it's underwhelming, right? But
because they don't know any of the
they don't know the prospects. Exactly.
They don't, and it's okay not to know them. You're not supposed to know them. And first of all, it's very difficult to know if they will even be good. It's like so hard to know if these guys will be the NHL players, especially at a young age.
That's why Steve's awesome, because he has the insight on all that, and he, is keyed into all those younger guys that really a lot of people don't really watch, right, or pay attention to.
And look, and the reality is that this is a patient game, and this is like Tortorella's nonstop in saying this. It's like he's like, you guys don't like it. He's like, tough. He's like, this is it.
If they're gonna build it the right way, it's gonna be painful for sure.
But I think that what he's doing is working. Like I hear a lot of people saying like, oh, it's not working. It is working, in my opinion.
Oh,
we are the least talented. This group, unhealthy.
Yeah.
Right now on paper is the least talented group that I have seen the Flyers ice in a long time, and yet they're as competitive as the team that was more talented
from last season. And I mean,
and the one dude without Claude Giroux, the team collapsed constantly.
Yeah, I would say arguably, I mean, if you look on paper, right, without Tortorella in the mix, like the talent level could be bottom 3 in the league, and obviously he's propelled them to beyond that. So it just shows that what he's doing has to have some effect in a positive manner.
I've never seen such a weak offense from a Flyers lineup.
Yeah, I mean,
Kevin Hayes is not supposed to be your leading point scorer.
No, honestly,
in your active roster.
At this point, I was watching the game the other day with my dad, and we were both kind of agreed that Owen Tippett is basically the only guy on the team that can consistently create a scoring chance or really score.
I mean, yes, the consistent. I would say Frost is getting there.
Yeah.
I think Farabee's having an off year, but he's another guy. This is why I'm saying like all these guys are in their early 20s. They're not supposed to be right. They're not supposed to be these guys.
Yeah.
They're not ready. If you guys don't remember when the Flyers were the worst team in the league, like Mike Richards, Jeff Carter, they were all like 20 years old, 21 years old coming in the NHL. And they stunk. The team stunk. They showed some upside. They weren't able to lead the team at that age. They had to add, they had to build around it. It took a little bit, it took 2-3 years. They added some star players, and then slowly these guys matured into star players. 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 points. That's how majority of the great players are made in the NHL. Every now and then, a handful of guys come in and are lights out from the very beginning. That does happen too, but those are outliers, and they're also not the only way of producing stars. Patrice Bergeron was not a star. He was like kind of forgotten about. And Tage Thompson. There are Brad Marchand, David Pasternak. There are so many players out there.
Sean Couturier.
Claude Giroux. Yeah. Jake Voracek struggled in the beginning. There are so many players out there that
young guys, more often than not, young guys are going to struggle at the beginning of their career, then come in and just light it on fire right away. So.
Yes. And sometimes players hit their peak early, and then that's pretty much it. That happens too sometimes. But again, that's more of an outlier also.
Yeah.
All right, let's end it on here. Anything you want to tell people, Silly?
Probably have an article most likely this weekend at some point. We'll see how bad the snow is. That'll affect it. But other than that, not much. But thanks to everybody, for listening and keeping with us. Last 2 weeks, like we've been saying, we're noticing like a big rise in our viewership. Yeah. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely noticing it. And sorry if I annoy people with this current episode. I know a lot of people are probably really angry, and maybe not hearing me as frustrated with it is maybe upsetting. But this one just, I don't know. Like today didn't rock anything for me. I guess I didn't have high expectations for today.
I was pretty pissed. I'm not gonna lie, you could probably tell throughout the episode. But
everybody I talked to today was pissed.
Yeah, what I'll say is, there wasn't much of a track record to expect from Fletcher, but he should have been able to trade JVR. And he didn't, and it's a failure.
That's weird as shit.
Yeah, I've never seen it before. We said it multiple times. We've never seen anything like this.
I've never seen it before. But again, I think the fireable offenses are the multiple long losing streaks.
Yeah, that of course that's unacceptable. Add this on top too. It just all clusters
Yes.
in.
Like I already hit my ceiling with him. So at this point, I'm just kind of like, all right, well, more of the
He's
same.
gone at some point, probably after the season.
I, it looks that way to me, but I've been wrong before. All right. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. We really, really appreciate it. Like Vasili was saying, we definitely noticed it in our numbers and the comments and everybody. And, I did ask a question out to how people felt about Chuck Fletcher. And, I was just reading people's responses. Everybody obviously is super frustrated right now. Try to be a little bit patient. It won't always be like this. I know it feels like it will. That's why I get really annoyed when all these people are like, oh, get ready for pain for the next 3-4 years. Who the hell are you talking about? Who are you talking to? First of all, the same people who tell you that, they've gotten everything wrong up until now, too. All these trade rumors were wrong. Almost all of them were absolutely wrong. And people make, I know people want to combat what I say. I've been doing this for so fucking long. Trade rumors are always wrong. It drives everybody nuts. It's okay that it's out there. I'm not saying that it should be removed, but just try to take it easy. Things are not as clear as they try to pretend like they know what's really up. Like it's not. And I guess one more thing here, I'll say this is just look at the way John Tortorella responded to the Provorov trade rumors. He laughed at it. Again, I don't know what's happening. Okay. I'm not saying people are liars. I see the names out there like everybody else. But when you see the head coach laugh at the idea, which I laugh at it. I'm like, what the fuck? Why would you trade this guy? I don't know what's going on. I'm just saying. I don't know, but there's just so much inconsistent stuff.
If he was going to be traded, you think the coach obviously would have to sign off, and doesn't.
You think the coach isn't using him at all times in all situations more than everybody else on the team? That's all I'm saying. You would think there would actually be a visible sign that this guy is going to be leaving town.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know. My whole point is we just don't know what's going to happen.
We gotta wait and see here. Yeah, it's true.
Remember, the people told you Cutter Gauthier wasn't an elite prospect. Remember that. I'm going to say that because that's everybody said that to you outside of this podcast. I listen to all the podcasts. Well, he's not an elite prospect, he's just a top 5 guy. Blah blah. Brady Tkachuk was a top 5 guy. It's
they don't know until they hit the NHL. And
that's what I'm saying. You have no idea what's going to happen. So just
wait. Let it fall where it may.
Yeah, let it fall as it may. And if you're that frustrated, don't watch. That's the best way to insult the Flyers. And I mean that honestly. It's actually not the engagement. It's ignoring them and not giving them money. Vote with your wallet.
That's the best way to sum it up. Sure.
They will change. If people stop going to games, you think they didn't see that Rangers thing?
Oh, 100%.
They're aware. They're not going la la la. They're going, well, we're running out of time here, Fletcher. All right. Let's end it on that. I keep going. All right. Thank you again, Vasili. Thank you as always, my friend. This is a good one. Again, subscribe, share, any comments, all that stuff. Dislike, if you want, whatever you want to do. But appreciate all the interaction. And please, again, if you can go rate us on Spotify and iTunes, that is a big help for us. It just drives traffic to us just by recommendations and stuff like that. So again, thank you so much. And remember, always stay gritty.